Chief Executive Officer for real estate concern in New Jersey. Gary is married to Kathy. He has 2 daughters, a son, and 4 grandchildren. He is currently retired and lives in Shrewsbury. And now Gary has all the time to fulfill his passion as a writer with a great interest and focus on history. Gary DiGregorio.
Thank you. I want to thank Irene and Leo and Kate for giving me this opportunity to meet with you and discuss this topic, which is Pope Pius XII and his silent war. When I was going for my master's degree, I was writing a paper about Nazi Germany. And what interested me was, how does a nation that has 96% Christians fall into Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, National Socialism? And during that time that I was researching that topic and trying to understand how the nation fell into that bad situation, I realized that the Catholic Church was also part of this diagram of what happened. And Pope Pius XII, does anybody remember Pope Pius XII?
Yes.
Okay, Pope Pius XII, we'll get into his biography, but he lived until 1958. I was born in 1954, so I really don't remember him. But Pope Pius XII was the Pope during this period of time. And as I did my research on his involvement with the church in Nazi Germany, I realized that there was a lot of controversy regarding this topic. And if you look at the outline, I start the outline with, why did Pope Pius XII remain silent? This is basically the controversy. Why did he remain silent when he knew of the atrocities perpetrated by the Nazis and the fascists against the Jews? That is the essence of the controversy. Now, the records of Pope Pius XII have been sealed in the archives of the Vatican since 1958. And what makes this topic timely is that Pope Francis, in March of this year, just a couple of months ago, announced that he was going to open the secret files of Pius XII next year. So there'll be more research done on this topic to get an understanding of how he delegated authority and how he proceeded during this very difficult time. We look at Pope Pius XII. This is him sitting on his, there's the controversy. And let's look at his career for a second, in case you're not familiar with it. He was born in Rome, March 2nd, 1876. The Pacelli family, Eugenio Pacelli was his name. The Pacelli family was part of the black nobility. And the black nobility, basically what they did was they backed the Papal States during the unification of Italy in the late 19th century. So his family, going back to his great-grandfather, his father, his grandfather, his cousins, his brother, they were all involved in either the legal aspects of the Vatican or they played administrative roles. So the Pacelli family basically had an open door into the Vatican. In 1899, he was ordained a priest. 1917, now I don't have to tell you what happened in 1917. We have World War I going on. 1917 to 1925, he was the nuncio to Germany. And this is very important in the history of Eugenio Pacelli. The reason why it's so important is that a nuncio to Germany was basically, he was an ambassador for the Vatican in Germany during that period. And if you know anything about what happened in Germany after World War I, there was tremendous upheaval, economic collapse. The communists were coming in, infiltrating the government. And that's where Adolf Hitler had his nationalistic, his dialogue that he gave out to the people, and they embraced Hitler because of the economic situation that that Germany was in at the time. So he was the nuncio of Germany, and during that time he met a number of people that became major players in Nazi Germany later on that would be part of the German resistance. 1929 to 1939, he was the Cardinal Secretary of State, and basically it's the same as any country. The Vatican became a country after the Lateran Accords were signed, which we'll get into in a minute. And then March 2nd, 1939, he was elected Pope, and he died October 9th, 1958. So his life encompassed 82 years of dramatic history, which we'll go into very briefly. And here is a picture of Jews being processed at Auschwitz. This is the real controversy. He knew that Jews were being persecuted by the Nazis, but yet he didn't speak out. Why? That's the real controversy that we're discussing tonight. Now, it all starts on the night of February 9th, 1939. Pope Pius XI, anybody remember him? That goes back now. But Pope Pius XI, Achille Ratti, was scheduled to give a speech in 2 days to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the Lateran Accords. Now, the Lateran Accords was an agreement that was signed by the Vatican and Italy. And basically, it lists out all the rights and everything, how they would proceed going in the future. The Lateran Accords were signed by Eugenio Pacelli's brother. He wrote it. He was the lawyer for the Vatican at that time. So you see that even at that time, he had input on that. Now, informants to Mussolini told him that Pius XI was planning to embarrass El Duce by condemning the Nazis and the fascists about their racial policies. He was vehement against the Nazis, and he was about to explode with this world stage that he had for the Lateran Accords. All the cardinals from all over the world were coming into Rome to hear the Pope, his speech. At that same time, he was about to release what was called the Humani Generis Unitas, which is a unity of the human race, which was an encyclical that 3 monks basically wrote on his behalf, and the lead monk was a man from the United States, John Lafarge. So he was reviewing this encyclical, about to release it, and it was going to condemn the Germans and also the Italians, Italy and Germany. Now, during the night, he has heart failure and dies. He's 81 years old. Here's where the controversy even of Achille Ratti is. His lead physician was Francesco Petacci. He was the father of Mussolini's mistress. Now, Claretta, who was his mistress, she died with Mussolini. She was, if you know what happened to Mussolini at the end, they were shot and hung up in Milan, I believe it was in Milan, and they were hung up upside down. But she was with him at the time. So the question is, was there some foul play going on? Did the doctor do something to accelerate his demise? That's one of the questions. When he dies, Eugenio Pacelli, who was the cardinal secretary, he confiscates all the copies of the speech that he was about to give, and also the encyclical that he was reviewing, and puts it into the Vatican archives. Now, why did he do that? That's one of the questions. Here's a picture of Pope Pius XI. That's Achille Ratti. Why did he put his explosive speech and the encyclical that was about to be released? He put it in the archives. In all probability, he wanted to have a clean slate. Now, don't get me wrong. Pius XII had reasons for everything he did, and we'll get into that. Next, when did this whole controversy begin? This is what I wanted to find out. Where did this controversy come from? There was a play that came out called The Deputy. Has anybody ever heard of this play? Rolf Hochhuth wrote this play. It opened in West Berlin in 1963. It went all throughout Europe, and it also played actually in New York City, and I believe also in Chicago. But basically, the plot of the story is a German engineer who's at Auschwitz. He goes to the nuncio and begs him to tell the Pope to speak out about what's going on. The nuncio equivocates. He doesn't proceed to, tell the Pope what's going on. So he decides, this one priest that was present at the time, he decides to go to the Pope and tell him what's going on. And when he goes there, the Pope explains why he can't proceed and be vocal about what's happening to the Jews, especially. So that's where the controversy began. This play was shown throughout Europe and in these cities in the United States, and it showed that Pope Pius XII, he did not. It seemed that he really didn't want to ruffle the feathers of Nazi Germany. Why was that? Now, here's the controversy with the play. There was a Romanian intelligence officer, and this came out in 2007. It was in the National Review. There was a Romanian intelligence officer by the name of Ian Pesipe. It's on the sheet here. And he claimed that the KGB got into the Vatican archives, grabbed some of the Chiller files, some of the Pope Pius XII files, and that was the basis of the play. And because Pius XII was so anti-communist, so anti-Bolshevik, they wanted to get back at him. So that's the controversy about the play itself, and this play started the controversy about Pope Pius XII. Before that, there really was no controversy. This really started the ballgame. Here's Rolf Hochhuth, picture of him. Now, probably the most famous book on this topic is called Hitler's Pope. Anybody hear of it? John Cornwell? You heard of it? It came out in 1999. This was the cover picture. And when you look at the picture, it appears that Pope Pius XII is with the Nazis. However, this was during the Weimar period in the 1920s, 1927, before he was even Pope. This was when he was Cardinal Secretary. But the picture was used on the front page. Now, I actually emailed Cornwell to ask him, because he wrote the book in 1999, and I wanted to ask him, over the years, did he change his feeling about Pius XII since 1999? I mean, that's 30 years ago. So he basically said that the Catholic Church and Pius XII, they gave credence to the Nazis by signing the Concordat, which we will get to right now. But his opinion did not change. However, the cover picture is a bit misleading. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Now, if you think about your life, the things that you were exposed to, this is a man that was not only exposed to these things, but actually had part in the determination of how these things played out. First of all, when he first came in 1917, he co-authored the Code of Canon Law, which is basically the doctrine of the Catholic Church that was used into the 1980s until it was changed after that. He delivered, during the time when he was in Germany, he delivered the Vatican peace proposals during World War I. He met with the Kaiser. The Kaiser actually reflected on Pacelli and said he was a very impressive man. However, his efforts went to no avail. At the time that he went to bring the Vatican peace treaties, they didn't agree with it. At the same time, he was dealing with various issues that arose during the Industrial Revolution during the late 19th century, early 20th century. And those are modernism, the whole scientific worldview. That came about. They had to have a policy to refute that. Anti-clericism, in France they were closing churches, they wanted separation of church and state. Social Darwinism, which Hitler adopted by survival of the fittest, and they started a euthanasia program in Nazi Germany and started basically killing elderly people. And this whole idea of the social Darwinism that there was a superior race, that the Nordics were a superior race. And then finally, communism in Europe, which was spreading rapidly after the Russian Revolution in 1917. So he was involved in dealing with these issues through all the Catholic churches throughout Europe. He also served as nuncio in Germany during the post-war economic collapse, and he witnessed the rise to Adolf Hitler. So he saw it firsthand what was happening in Nazi Germany. And he was exposed to the anti-Semitism that was prevalent in Germany, Austria at that time, and somehow it may have affected his attitudes towards the Jews. You never really know about that. But his exposure there for 11 years, it gave him, there are some texts that I quote in the book a little, that it would appear that he had he wasn't speaking very nicely about the Jews at certain times. So that was a bit of a problem. He negotiated the Concordat with Nazi Germany in 1933. Now here's the thing. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. As soon as he became Chancellor of Germany, a month later was the Reichstag. The Reichstag fire. This is when he signed the Concordat. But there was a Reichstag fire, and he wanted to have complete control of the government. So in March of 1933, he wanted to have the Catholics behind him for the Enabling Act. The Concordat that was signed with Germany basically outlined the relationship that the church would have with Germany, and it basically listed the rights that each party would have. So he signs that in July of 1933. At the same time, Adolf Hitler wanted to transform the entire Christian church into something that would be beneficial to Nazi Germany. And what he did was he set up his own, let's say his own, call it for lack of a better name, he set up his own pope, and he wanted to consolidate the Protestants and the Catholic Church into one Reichschurch that would benefit the German people and that he could control. The problem is that the Catholic Church rebelled against that idea, and the confessing church. Anybody ever hear of Dietrich Bonhoeffer? Yeah. Well, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of the ministers in the Protestant church that rebelled. Karl Barth was another one. They rebelled against this idea of a Reichschurch, so they split the Christian church at the time. So during 1933, it was very volatile as far as the church was concerned. And by the end of the year, Hitler basically tossed the idea out the window because he saw it was going nowhere. It was causing a lot of division, a lot of problems for him, and it never came to fruition. However, the abuse of the Catholic Church during this time became more intensified. They started closing youth groups and making the kids joined the Nazi youth. They were abusing ex-party members from the Center Party. So there was a lot of discrimination going on, a lot of abuse going on by Nazi Germany. As you can see in this picture, Hitler had plans to reform the churches into the Reichschurch, where they wanted not only the crucifix, the cross of Christ, they also wanted the swastika as well. And a lot of the churches were waving these Nazi flags on their, outside of their apse and hanging them all over the church. So it was very disturbing. Now, here's the lead up to the war. January 1933, Adolf Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. July 1933, the Vatican Concordat is signed. That's the agreement. February 1939, Pope Pius XI dies. We talked about that. March 1939, Eugenia Pacelli becomes Pius XII. And here's where World War II begins. September 1939, Germany invades Poland. June of 1941, I'm hopping around here because these are events that really affect the Catholic Church at the time. But June of 1941, Germany invades Soviet Union. December 1941, as everybody knows, Pearl Harbor, United States enters war. July of 1943, now we're really accelerating here, Mussolini is arrested and ousted out of power. He's also later liberated by a parachuting team that Nazi Germany sends and liberates him, and they set up a puppet government in North Italy that didn't last long. He was eventually assassinated. September 1943, this is where it gets very interesting. Italy signed the armistice agreement, and the Nazis came in and occupied Rome. I was just in Rome a couple months ago. It's just a magnificent city. It's a beautiful city. The thought of Nazis all over the city is just disturbing. But what happened was, this is when it really intensified. Now you had the Nazis actually occupying Rome. And Pius XII understood that Hitler wanted to arrest him and send him to Berlin. Pius XII was also concerned that, first of all, there were bombings going on in Italy. The Church of San Lorenzo was hit. Hundreds of people were killed. He was writing letters to the President of the United States, Roosevelt, asking him to please not bomb Rome.